because of the failures in the Biden administration, every single state in the country became a border state. Someone had been deported during the Trump administration, came back into the United States under Biden, had a pretty lengthy criminal record, should never have been allowed to come back into the U.S., hit and killed a nurse that worked at Children's Hospital in my hometown of Little Rock. When you have an incident like that, it becomes really personal really fast.
And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman, and I am here at the studio with one of my favorite governors in the country. I'll probably get some flack for saying one of my favorite, but yes, one of my favorites, a personal friend, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders from Arkansas. You may know her as the press secretary from President Trump for 2 years. I think it was 2017 to 2019. She really made a splash. Then she ran for governor, and she's doing an amazing job there in Arkansas. We'll talk about that today. She's about 2 years plus into that role. And you've seen her recently in the White House talking about school choice. Today, we're going to talk about her experience as White House press secretary, her thoughts on the current press secretary, how she's doing, a young 27-year-old press secretary in those shoes, really doing, from my perspective, a great job. Her experience as governor, as the daughter of a governor, the great Mike Huckabee. The issues between the federal and the state government now, we're seeing some interplay between there, some tension in the Democratic states and some support from the governors of the Republican states for the initiatives of President Donald Trump. And of course, her father's recent appointment and hopefully confirmation by the time this airs as the newest ambassador to Israel, her connection there, and lots of topics between there. Governor Sanders, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and such an honor to be with you and get to talk through so many big things that are happening around the country and frankly around the world.
Yeah, so first of all, I have to share my excitement because really we've known you for a while. You and your father and your family watched your journey, and it's sort of in excitement and in awe. Kind of every position you've taken, you've excelled at. I'm not just saying that. I don't say it to all my guests.
You're
Feel free.
just making up for
Feel
saying I
free.
was only one of your favorite
Yeah,
governors.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I am in Florida, and you are now here in South Florida, so we got to respect our Ron DeSantis, who we all love down here. But what I first wanted to talk about was your experience as press secretary for President Trump. But let's frame it this way: in this term of President Trump, 47, everybody knows who he is. They know what he's saying. They almost understand his style and his strategy. That was not the case the first time. What was it like to be essentially the spokesperson for the president as press secretary for the White House?
Well, certainly there's a very different feeling having just been in DC, both for the inauguration and then a few days ago to meet with the president and talk about school choice and what he can do on that. There's a very different feel in all of Washington than there was when he got elected the first time. There's a lot more support. I think there's a lot more optimism, and there's a lot more confidence, and not just from people outside of the White House, but also in the White House. They've been there before. You have some experience. The president's coming in knowing exactly what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, and who he needs in place to execute it. And you're seeing that by the speed at which he is moving. Everybody knew he would come in and do big things and be a disruptor and move quickly. I don't think anybody was fully prepared for just how
Yeah.
fast and how drastic he was going to be able to move and make things happen. But we shouldn't be surprised because it's what he told us he was going to do. And if you may not love the way Donald Trump does things, but you can bet that he's going to get it done at the end of the day. And so I'm amazed and working as much as we can to be supportive each step of the way. And hopefully, Arkansas can be a place that they use to implement some of the big changes and big policies that they want to see happen. And let that be kind of a proof of concept for some of these kind of, I think, big shifts that we're seeing from the federal government.
Yeah, definitely. But when we see the president in this term, and it's only been a few weeks, when this term stepping up to the microphone almost every day, and last term as well, but in a way that there's a confidence about him, and almost the media, even though the coverage is still what the coverage is, but when you even hear the questions, it seems like they understand what he's doing, like tariffs, for example. They know he's using it as a negotiating tool, right? Before they didn't know what he was doing with it. So yes, there's a debate. There's people on the right and the left who are talking about the effectiveness of tariffs, the risks of tariffs, for example, but at least they know where he's coming from, it seems like. And the press secretary, to focus on that for a second, most of the time is translator in chief almost, right? Has to like translate what he's doing. What are your thoughts on Carolyn Levitt, 27 years old? She seems bombastic. She comes out swinging, and what's your perspective? Your point of view is pretty will be interesting because you've been in those shoes.
Well, I think in a short amount of time, she's already making a great name for herself. She did a phenomenal job in her first ever press briefing. And having gone through that process, it can be kind of terrifying to step into that room knowing that you have people there that are looking for nothing more than to see you fail. And she defied all odds. And she didn't just like survive, she thrived in that moment and did an incredible job pushing back, but also showing her depth and substance. And that is a huge difference from what we've seen from the previous press secretary in the Biden administration, somebody who couldn't answer questions, didn't seem to have a good understanding of what was going on. No, in fairness to her, neither did President Biden. So it was a little bit more difficult. But I think Caroline's done a great job stepping into the role quickly, showing that she's in command of the room and has good command and understanding of the issues. And I think she's going to do a great job for the president.
Yeah, first of all, we're all celebrating not having to watch KSP up there flipping through her binders. When you ask a question, there's like a trigger word. Oh, you said Gaza. I have a divider for Gaza. Oh, you're saying immigration, and then just reading what it says, irrelevant, not a real conversation. What I'm in awe of when I'm looking at Carolyn Levitt, and I know it's again just a few weeks, but is her confidence.
Yeah.
27 years old to be in that room in the White House speaking on behalf of the president. But what's What's the number one role or goal as a press secretary at the White House?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that you're there not necessarily to share your thoughts and opinions, but to share the president's. Your goal is to communicate what it is he's doing, why he's doing it, and why it's important for the country. And she's been able to execute on every single one of those objectives. And that's why I think she's going to do a great job. And the president is, I think, lucky to have her out there speaking on his behalf because she's doing a phenomenal job representing him.
Amazing. Let's shift a little bit to your shift from the White House to the campaign trail and then to the governor's mansion in Little Rock, Arkansas, a place you were familiar with. You basically grew up there with your father, having been governor of Arkansas. Now, just tell us a little bit about what was the thing that surprised you the most of actually being a governor?
It's amazing how quickly you feel the weight of the office. As press secretary, a job that I loved and had the opportunity to do for a little over 2 years, and in the administration for two and a half, I was speaking for somebody else. I was there to communicate and walk through President Trump's policies. Now, the decisions lie with me, the weight of whether or not it's the right thing, if we're doing it correctly, all of those things, all of that responsibility sits squarely with you. And so it's a big difference of making sure that you're doing everything to the very best of your ability and actually delivering for the people that you serve. But it also is incredibly rewarding because you get to be in the moment and see the impact that you're having on people's lives. A story that I love to tell that I think illustrates so perfectly why I love being governor, but also why that role is so important, and certainly why we've seen it play such a big role over the last 4 years. When we had Biden in the White House instead of Trump, it was Republican governors who were holding the line across the country and making sure that we were protecting our freedoms and protecting our way of life and our values because we couldn't count on Washington to do any of those things. But growing up, as you noted, I had a dad that was a governor. In fact, we're the only father daughter pair ever in history,
I
which
know
is pretty
my
amazing.
daughter, like you heard, reminds me of that often.
Yeah, so no pressure, but we're waiting on you to, I think there's a good political path there. But my dad talked about how much he loved being governor and how it was the best job in the world. And, fast forward to getting elected, becoming governor. I'd been in office a couple weeks. I'm fighting with the legislature. We're trying to get things done in those early days. And I was thinking to myself, like, this is the best job in the world. So I call my dad and I'm like, hey, you know how you're always talking about this is the best job? It's so amazing. I asked him, I said, when exactly will that start for me? And he kind of laughed and in a way that only a dad can, put me in my place very quickly. And he said, well, Sarah, you haven't done anything yet. I was thinking, gosh, I called you for encouragement, not to further put me down. But he went on, he said, let me explain. And he walked me through at some point, you're going to be at the grocery store or one of your kids' baseball games or at a gas station, and somebody's going to come up to you and they're going to tell you that because of the work that you've done to cut taxes or provide education freedom accounts, like their kids are now thriving when they once were struggling. And he said, once you get the chance to see the decisions that you're making have a real impact and real influence on somebody else's life, he goes, that's when you know it's the best job in the world. You fast forward, and now I'm 2 years into the job, and I get to go into communities, both big and small, all over the state of Arkansas and hear people's stories and hear how their life is just a little bit better today than it was before I started. And that gives you some real perspective, but also real motivation to continue on, keep fighting, keep delivering. And it's a great reminder that the things that you're doing actually have influence over people's day to day life. And so it's an incredible opportunity. It's a job that I love, and I'm honored that I get to serve in. And hopefully, the people of Arkansas will let me do it for another 6 years.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. But I think I always say being mayor and governor are the best jobs in politics. Probably governor more, you have a little bit more broader powers, but where you actually get to affect people's lives. But what's interesting is, ever since COVID in particular, people are really hyper focused on local government, state and local government. And the federal government is out there putting out these grand ideas, and then the implementation a lot of times can either live or die with local. And we saw that under Biden a lot. And I want to focus on two specific topics. One is education, and the other is immigration. And going first on the immigration side, under Biden, you as governor, along with other Republican governors, if not all of them, if I'm not mistaken, sent troops, National Guard troops, to the border to help secure the border, to help Governor Abbott in Texas to secure the border. The tension there between the federal government and state government. Tell me why it was important for you and the other Republican governors to do that under President Biden.
It got really simple because of the failures in the Biden administration. Every single state in the country became a border state. We were seeing a total influx of violent, illegal immigrants. We were seeing a total influx of drugs coming into our communities, something that no person, much less any governor, wants to see impacting their state. And so when Governor Abbott started to take steps in securing at least the Texas border, we wanted to do our part and help out in that because it was changing the way that we were operating even in Arkansas, despite the fact that we were hundreds of miles away from the border itself. There was a situation in Arkansas. We have a number of incidents, but one in particular where someone had been deported during the Trump administration, came back into the United States under Biden, had a pretty lengthy criminal record, should never have been allowed to come back into the US, came back, and hit and killed a nurse that worked at Children's Hospital in my hometown of Little Rock, because he was drunk driving. And so when you have an incident like that, it becomes really personal really fast. And it became very clear that we had to take action, and that was one of the best ways that we could aid in the effort to help secure our border and step up because the federal government wasn't going to. Republican governors came together, worked together, and sent hundreds of troops to the southern border to do our part. Proud of the fact that we had men and women from Arkansas who went the first time as, you know, totally unknown to what they were going to. And the second time, every single person that went volunteered to go because they knew that the mission mattered and they saw firsthand how important and impactful it was. And so we were glad we were able to play a small part in helping secure the border.
Yeah, we recently saw the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, be at the border, and he said something that stayed with me, which was these troops, these men and women, have been protecting other people's borders for many years. Now it's time to protect our own.
Mm.
Now, with President Trump back in office, we're seeing again the president call on the Republican governors across the state to support his initiatives, which we're seeing everywhere. We're seeing here in Florida. There's been recently was a big fight between the legislature and the governor, which we'll leave for another day. But basically, everybody was fighting who can be more pro-Trump, who can help more. Hopefully, they work things out when the regular session starts. The special session didn't work out for anybody, for either side. But we're seeing Democratic governors, many of them, really take strong positions against the governor on immigration. What's your take on that? Is the role of the federal government that the state government really needs to implement it, can implement it much more quickly and easier because they've got guys and girls on the streets who can actually go out and find people or just take people in that have already been arrested on other crimes and send them out. What's your take on this dichotomy between the Democratic governors and their approach to immigration under Trump and the Republicans?
Look, I think you have some Democrat governors that don't want Trump to be successful because they don't want him to be right. And so they're going to fight him every step of the way. Thankfully, this is a president who you can either get on board and help out, or you could not, and he's still going to get the job done anyway. We're happy and proud to partner not just with the federal government, but Trump specifically to help secure the border, bring law and order back to the country. We've offered resources. We'll continue to do that, and aid wherever we can to make sure we have the safest and strongest America we ever have.
Wanted to go over to education. You've been a big proponent of school choice, as is the president. The president passed an executive order really urging the Department of Education to work with states to try to expand school choice. There's two things I want to ask you about. One is the Department of Education. There's a big debate going on of whether it should be reformed or abolished altogether and just leave education to the states and to the local government. What's your take on that?
Well, in Arkansas, I'd be happy if they left it to the states, but in California, I might have a little less confidence in Gavin Newsom to deliver. But I think that if the federal government can provide a lot more flexibility, then governors can execute. But I do think that they have to put some accountability measures in place to make sure states like California and New York don't just basically take the money and run, but they actually invest in students and student outcomes. We're going to do that in Arkansas. You're going to see other Republican governors step up because that's what we've been doing over the last several years. While we haven't had a partner in the White House, we've done it on our own. But to be able to work with them and have additional funding, I think gives us the ability to have maximum impact. Arkansas passed transformational education reform. It was the first and biggest priority I had coming in as governor. You're a parent, you have a big family. You can look at your kids and know that what works for one may not work for all
Sure.
of them. And so we shouldn't expect our education system to be a one size fits all. We need to make sure every kid has an opportunity to be successful. And that's going to look different, not just within one family, but imagine across an entire state. And so my goal as governor is to make sure every kid in Arkansas has an opportunity and a pathway to success. We passed and are implementing universal school choice, where every single student in the state of Arkansas, their parent can help decide how and where they can best be educated, which is how it should work. Now we have a federal government that will help by supporting and aiding us in that instead of fighting us every step of the way. I think that will make a huge difference in our ability to deliver for students and really set them up for success instead of trapping them in a lifetime of poverty, a lifetime of difficulty simply because of the zip code they were born into.
Just a side note, which I can tell you off the air, but I'll tell you on the air instead. One thing to look out for, because we've seen this implemented in Florida, is the private schools, after the parents get a voucher basically for $8,000. It's not really a voucher, but it's essentially a voucher for $8,000. Little by little, with not so little by little, within a few years, they started increasing the tuition to make up for it, which sort of obviates the whole thing. So you should look at respectfully putting in some sort of mechanism for those schools. If you're going to be taking this money, you can't just raise tuition in the next X amount of years or something of that sort.
And we heard that from other states who were a little bit ahead of us and some of the cities who had done similar programs. And so we've given the ability for our Department of Education to intervene when we see things like that happening, to try and prevent people from taking advantage of the
Right.
system. So far, we have not had major incident, and hopefully we won't. But if we do, we've given the State Department of Education the ability to intervene to maintain some accountability.
Last point on education, you put forward a bill this session, very interesting as a parent of 5 kids, saying no cell phones in schools at all,
Yeah.
as far as I understand. No cell phones, no smartwatches. That's I think
Well,
what it said, right? So you can't even
bell to
get around.
bell, no cell. So
Bell to bell, no
it's
cell.
easier to remember when we
Yeah, so
do it
tell
like
me,
that. Yeah.
how's it being received in Arkansas? I mean, as a parent, I jumped up and down. I said, "How are we doing this in Florida?" I try to fight with my kids all day, and the schools let them have the phones. It's just terrible. Tell me about it.
It's amazing. We started this program over the summer, and this last several months was our first year of implementation, but it was voluntary. No one was required to participate, but we opened up a pilot program in our state and said that the state would cover the cost of the pouches, the lockers for students to put their phones in. And within the first 6 weeks of announcing the program, 75% of Arkansas school districts volunteered to participate. It shows what a demand and hunger and what a problem cell phones have become in the classroom. We've seen our suicide, anxiety, depression rates skyrocket. We've seen our productivity rates plummet. There is every piece of data will tell you that having a cell phone in the classroom is not helpful to our students. So we have to take action. We are excited that we have broad support for this, not just from the teachers, which of course, they don't wanna be the phone police, and I think they're glad to have somebody else coming in and helping give them some support in the process, but the surprising part is the students that you talk to, they fight you at first, but after the first few weeks and they get used to it, students are actually saying how much better it is to not have their phones. It takes so much pressure off of them.
Mm.
They're not checking to see, did somebody respond to my text? Did somebody like my post? It relieves a lot of pressure from our students who, frankly, are under already a significant amount of pressure. Being a teenager is hard. And so by adding that cell phone pressure to their day to day, it makes it even more difficult. And we're trying to give a little bit of a release valve, help them focus on the school day free of distraction. I think it's going to have a tremendous impact for our students, not just their productivity, more importantly, for their mental health. That's something that no community has been spared from. The impact that cell phones and complete and total unrestricted access to social media has created a mental health crisis in the youth in America and frankly around the world. And I think this is one of the first steps that we can take to help change our culture, bring about a shift, and really, I think, protect our students for the long term.
I could say selfishly, I hope it works, and I hope it's beginning a trend-setting item bill that goes around the country because we see it with our own kids, but also nationally, not just on the, of course, with the mental health, but also we need to raise a generation that knows how to have a conversation,
Yeah.
and they don't, which is pretty scary. Let's just shift over to your father. Your father now is in the process of being confirmed as ambassador to Israel. I know your family has a long, close relationship with Israel through personal and through the church. First of all, just what does that mean to the Huckabee family?
We could not be more proud. I think that this is a role that is the culmination of everything my dad has ever done in his life, has been building for him to take this on and to step into this moment. There's no one that loves the country and the people of Israel more and will fight more tirelessly to make sure they are safe, that they are protected, and that they remain one of America's closest and best allies. This is something for my dad that is not political, it's very deeply personal. Our faith does not exist without it. And so it is something that I don't think you'll find anybody that could be more committed and more devoted to taking this on than he will. And so we're, excited for him, but mostly we are proud and honored to see him do this.
Yeah, from where I sit, having him as ambassador is really a gift for a few reasons. What one is there's two different types of ambassadors. Maybe there's three. One are the career diplomats. Israel doesn't usually get career diplomats; it gets too important of a point, right? The other are just the wealthy friends who ask for the position, and then there are the ones that are there to make a difference, like like Ambassador Friedman did during his time, and your father's exactly that. And he also pisses off the right people, which is also a good, which is also a good judge of
Yeah,
character. Right? Judge me by my enemies.
he has no problem, making people mad if he feels like he's doing it for the right reasons. My dad is a person who leads by conviction. He leads by principle. And I don't know that there's anything he's more committed to and more ready to be part of and make a difference doing than this.
So this last year, we've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism in this country, all over the world, but in this country, particularly on college campuses, which if any student of history will know, that's usually where the big movements of anti-Semitism start in academia and sort of the highbrow crowds of societies. It happened in Europe in the 30s, and it's happening here again, unfortunately. And President Trump, it's interesting. I hesitated for a second because Secretary of State Rubio, when he was a senator, was very loud on one issue, and he kept saying, if you want to have get a student visa if you're a foreigner, and you want to get a student visa to study in the United States, you have to declare that you don't support a foreign terror organization. So why is it that when you land here and you get to Harvard or Columbia or any other school in this country, and you stand up and you outwardly support Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS or any foreign terror organization, we let you stay here. They should be deported. And Trump immediately implemented that policy, and they're doing it. I mean, we're seeing already one or two high-profile cases. It's exciting for those of us who follow this closely. But you're not letting Trump just take this issue on his own. I read an article recently on an initiative you have that I wanted to ask you about related to professors who are out there brainwashing our kids, not just on anti-Israel stuff, but anti-American, anti-Western values. Tell me a little bit about that.
At the end of the day, the state shouldn't support our institutions if they are going to indoctrinate our kids to hate America, to hate the things that we value, and hate and try to work to destroy one of our greatest allies. Shouldn't be tolerated. And it's something that we're going to fight aggressively against in Arkansas and hope that other states will follow our lead. The things that we're seeing take place on college campuses are absolutely unacceptable. And I think Senator Rubio, excuse me, I did the same thing.
Yes.
Secretary Rubio is exactly right. We should take a strong stance. We should basically have a zero tolerance policy. And I'm glad to see both he and the president be so outspoken and take specific direct action to make sure that this isn't something that continues in America.
And in Arkansas, this session, are you pushing something on tenure to pull back tenure on professors who are looking to brainwashing their students and things of that nature?
We are. We spend roughly $1 billion on higher education in the state of Arkansas alone. If we're going to invest that kind of money, we want our kids to be educated, not indoctrinated. And if we have a professor that is whether they're tenured or not, if that is the place and the role that they're trying to take on, we're simply not going to allow that in our state.
Well, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, thank you so much for being here. Everybody now knows why we're so enamored with you and our family, and why there's such a movement around you and your involvement in public life, because you're so clear in what you're trying to accomplish. You deliver that message really well, which I think you honed that really well as a press secretary for President Trump in the first term, and we're excited to see what's next for you. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gov. Thanks, everybody else. Please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and do all the great things you do to support podcasts, and we'll see you next time.